What do you say to a family who has a long-standing connection to this community? And also, what do you say to Eli, who has such a passion about cricket? So here is what I came up with.
קטונתי מכל החסדים ומכל האמת אשר עשית את עבדך. קטונתי מכל החסדים ומכל האמת אשר עשית את עבדך. קטונתי מכל החסדים אשר עשית את עבדך. אני קטונתי מכל החסדים ומכל האמת אשר עשית את עבדך. כי במקלי עברתי את הירדן, עתה הייתי לשני מחנות, הצילני נא, הצילני נא, כי במקלי עברתי את הירדן, עתה הייתי לשני מחנות, הצילני נא, הצילני נא, הצילני נא. כי אם חסדך גדול עליי, כי אם חסדך גדול עליי, והצלת נפשי משאול תחתיה.
This song is composed by an Israeli songwriter, Yonatan Razel. The first part of the lyrics is a direct quote from this week's Torah portion, Vayishlach. We found Jacob on the way back to his homeland. After many years in Haran, Jacob acquired a great wealth and large family. He is about to meet his twin brother, whom he tricked, and undoubtedly he feels guilty about. Jacob struggles with his feelings and finds himself in a difficult position of inner uncertainty. On the one hand, he had God's promise and hope that he will return to the land of his ancestors in peace. On the other hand, he knows that Esau is coming towards him with hundreds of armed people, armed soldiers. Just in case, Jacob decides to divide his family and possessions into two camps, so to protect at least half of them if his brother will not forgive him and decide to take revenge. The night before he is meant to meet his brother face to face, Jacob stays alone and prays. קטונתי מכל החסדים ומכל האמת אשר עשית את עבדך. I am unworthy, I am diminished, I am humbled by the kindness that you have so lovingly shown to your servant. With only my staff alone, I crossed Jordan River, and now I have acquired two camps. Please save me. At the time when this song was performed for the first time by Yonatan Razel, there was a rumor that he composed it after his 4-year-old daughter Rivka fell off a porch and was in coma. It took weeks until Rivka woke up and was eventually healed. People who knew this story assumed that this powerfully moving song Katonti was a gratitude for her recovery. Although the story is true, Razel himself says that he actually composed it years before it happened, And it was a tribute to his grandfather, who was one of Razel's early music influences, and introduced him to this verse in the Torah. Well, regardless of what is true, nowadays, most people associate this song with Jonathan's daughter. Things often change their significance and acquire different meaning in time. We see a similar change in what we would now call Jewish identity. In the early chapters of the Torah, our people are just a family of Abraham and Sarah, then Isaac, Rebecca, then family of Isaac, Rebecca, and finally, family of Jacob, Rachel, and Leah. Nowadays, we use the name Israel not only to refer to the Jewish people, but to the modern state of Israel. Today, there are many layers of meanings to this term, therefore to Jewish identity. One might think that Jewish people only started as a family and then it changed forever. But then we grew into a large group, but the notion of family remained with us. The Torah text and later rabbinic literature continues to make family references and constantly uses the phrase Bnei Yisrael, children of Israel, as the name of Jewish people. Every next layer doesn't cancel the previous one. It adds to the complex and multidimensional picture and definition of who we are. Let's have a closer look of the meaning of the word Israel. So what does it mean to be a Jewish then? Is it to be a part of a family? Is it to be Israel, someone who struggles with God? Let's take a look at the meaning of the word Israel. The name refers to the episode which we just read, when Jacob experienced the second encounter with the divine and wrestles with a mysterious man, Ish, in Hebrew. The story tells us that after a long struggle, he defeats the Ish, and at the end, the man gives Jacob the second name, Israel, wrestling with God. Almost all names in Hebrew has a meaning, and sometimes we find the verse explaining this meaning. And let's have a closer look at the verse explaining the name Israel. Ki sarita im Elohim ve'im anashim v'tochal. Because you have wrestled with God and with people and have prevailed, you will now be called Israel. And the English has very interesting ambiguity. By the way, the same happens with Hebrew. Wrestling with God. Does it mean that God on your side or against? And I think that this ambiguity, this tension between these two meanings is deliberate, both in Hebrew and now it's reflected in English. So many commentators were puzzled by this episode. Who did Jacob wrestle with? Who was this Ish? Clearly, this Ish was not an ordinary person. Was the Ish an angel from God? The medieval French commentator Rashi suggests, following Midrash Bereshit Rabbah, that the Ish was Esau's guardian angel. So in a way, he was wrestling in a mysterious, metaphysical way with an angel of Esau. But Esther Spitzer interpreted the narrative through the lens of contemporary psychology. And she sees the Ish as Jacob's own shadow, the dark and selfish side of himself. Whatever one's specific interpretation of the Ish, it's important to understand that the narrative, that the timing of the narrative, the context. Jacob finally faces the greatest conflict of his life. But before, he dealt with all his conflicts by running away from them. This is the first time when he faces it, face to face. Perhaps it is not a coincidence then that the life before his inner struggle was defined by his old name, Jacob, Yaakov, coming from the root, meaning heel. or to follow someone. So before this episode, Jacob was defined by somebody else. He chased others rather than improved himself. Now, when Jacob found the inner power to fight his selfish instinct, he is blessed by the Ish with the new name Israel, wrestling with God. Because as the Ish explains, Jacob wrestled with God and with people and prevailed. The name of Israel is the core of Jewish identity. The ability to fight and wrestle with your selfish instincts, the ability to go against the accepted norm and be brave enough to challenge conventions is what it means to be Israel, what it means to be Jewish. Over the last week, the British society discussed racism and cricket. And here is the cricket part comes in. Azim Rafiq is a 30-year-old former professional cricketer who spent the majority of his career at Yorkshire. He was born in Pakistan and moved to England when he was 10 years old. He captained England at youth level and eventually became captain of Yorkshire in 2012. In September 2020, he gave an interview in which he claimed that institutional racism at Yorkshire Country Cricket Club had left him close to taking his own life. Rafiq says he suffered consistent abuse, including the use of racist language about his Pakistani heritage during his time in the club. The decision to challenge and go against an abusive institution is a very brave decision, especially when you are the oppressed or the victim of racism. I was glad to hear that the club took it seriously and is determined to fight racism. On Thursday, however, Rafiq was forced to confront his own shortcomings in the past, from 11 years ago, and the Times uncovered a message exchange in which Rafiq used clearly anti-Semitic language. So the question is, does this cancel his previous fight for racism? Because he himself is anti-Semitic or used to be anti-Semitic. In a statement posted on Twitter, Rafiq said, "I am ashamed of this exchange and have now deleted it so as not to cause further offense." He added, "I was 19 at the time and I hope and believe that I am a different person today. I am increasingly angry at myself and I apologize to the Jewish community and everyone who is rightly offended by this." So many people immediately concluded that Rafiq has no integrity and cannot be trusted anymore. Social media is full now of hateful statements towards the cricketer. Let's come back to the notion of being Jewish. Being Jewish is to be a part of the children of Israel. It is to have a deep belief that people can change. People can wrestle with systems that support injustice and hate. To believe, being Jewish, is to believe that people should be given a chance to improve, that people should follow the example of Jacob and fight with our own dark instincts. We all have them. And be sure that you can prevail. To be Jewish is to believe in a better future, in the light, even when the world is dark. To be Jewish is to be a part of a family and remember that all people are connected, even if sometimes we don't want to remember it. Eli, your connection to your family is something which I really admire. And your family's connection to the LJS is something that I wish my family had, and to Judaism. And I hope that the lessons of Judaism, the lessons, what it means to be Jewish, will be with all of us for at least some time. Shabbat Shalom. we conclude our